Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 34, and today we're asking a pretty big question. What was the original economic blueprint for Pakistan? And how does that original vision stack up against the path the country has actually taken? We're going to be diving deep into an analysis that's based on the book Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan by Zaheer Ahmad Meer, and we're going to explore the economic framework that was envisioned right at the nation's founding. We'll look at the core principles of that vision and some of the tough questions the book raises about why reality turned out so different. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's start with this. This one sentence from the source really sets the stage for our entire conversation today. No nation achieves greatness on borrowed wealth. Just think about that for a second. It's such a powerful, fundamental idea about self-reliance, about independence, about national dignity. The author argues this wasn't just some nice-sounding platitude. It was meant to be the bedrock principle. So as we go through this, let's keep this idea right at the front of our minds, because the big question is, was Pakistan's economy designed from day one to be truly, completely sovereign?
All right, so let's start at the very beginning. What was that original blueprint? We're going to unpack the foundational economic ideas laid out by Pakistan's founder, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, as they're presented in the book. And look, this isn't just a dry history lesson. This is really about understanding what the economic DNA of the nation was supposed to be. It's the what if that frames everything that came later.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating, because you see how all these principles lock together like pieces of a puzzle. It all starts with that huge idea at the top, economic sovereignty, which basically means being the captain of your own ship, right? Making your own decisions. But you can't have that. It's literally impossible without the second point, zero dependency on foreign powers. So how do you pull that off? Well, the blueprint called for incredibly disciplined management at home. That means honest taxes coming in and completely transparent spending going out. You can't be strong on the world stage if your own house isn't in order. And the engine for all this, the thing that would power the whole system, national productivity. Pushing forward with modernizing both industry and agriculture at the same time. It wasn't just a list of goals, it was designed to be a complete self-reinforcing system.
And this right here, this was the mindset that was supposed to fuel that whole economic engine we just talked about: work, work, and work. The source presents this as so much more than just a famous slogan. It was meant to be the fundamental core ethic for building a nation from the ground up. It's about fostering a culture of discipline, a culture of productivity, this core belief that a nation creates its own wealth through its own sweat and its own effort, rather than just holding its hand out and asking for it from someone else. And this is maybe the most crucial takeaway from the founder's vision, according to the book. The source makes it crystal clear that the systems of dependency that are so common today, they were explicitly, deliberately ruled out from the very beginning. There was no line item for foreign loans that would dictate policy, no plan for aid packages that came with all sorts of strings attached, no room for pressure from groups like the IMF. The book puts it perfectly. The economy was designed to stand on its own 2 feet. Dependency was never, ever part of the Quaid's blueprint. And that right there sets up a massive contrast with what came next. Which, of course, brings us to the central conflict of this whole story. If the blueprint for self-reliance was so clear, so unambiguous, then what in the world happened? How did we get from that vision to where we are now? In this next part, we're going to explore the path that led away from that founding ideal and toward dependency, looking at the systemic failures that are identified in the book.
So the source presents this decline not as a single bad decision, but as a devastating chain reaction. You can almost see how one failure triggers the next, like a series of falling dominoes. It starts, the book argues, with systemic corruption. That corruption then opens the door for what's called elite resource capture, basically a small group getting control of the country's wealth. Well, once that happens, it leads directly to chronic fiscal mismanagement, because frankly, there's no accountability. With the money being so badly managed, you get a total lack of long-term industrial policy. And without that, key sectors like agriculture just stagnate. And the final tragic result of all this, the country's best and brightest talent just leaves. A brain drain driven by a simple lack of opportunity at home. It's a truly downward spiral.
This slide, I think, puts that divergence into the sharpest possible focus. It's just stark. On the left, you have those foundational principles from the Quaid's blueprint: economic sovereignty, self-reliance, disciplined spending. And then on the right, you have the reality that the source describes. Economic sovereignty was swapped out for policies driven by foreign donors. Self-reliance gave way to a deep dependency on foreign loans and aid. And that dream of disciplined spending, it dissolved into chronic mismanagement. The gap between these two columns isn't just a small policy disagreement. The book argues it represents a fundamental, radical deviation from the nation's entire founding ethos.
So, after laying out all of these systemic failures, the book starts building towards its central thesis, a really powerful conclusion about the true root cause of all these economic struggles. And it's a shift in perspective that is absolutely crucial to understand. It suggests the problem isn't about what Pakistan has, but rather how it's been managed.
I want you to just let this one sink in for a minute, because this is the absolute heart of the argument presented in Zaheer Ahmad Meer's book. Pakistan's economy did not collapse due to poverty of resources, it collapsed due to poverty of governance. The point the author is making is that the problem isn't a lack of natural wealth, it's not a lack of potential, and it's certainly not a lack of talented people. The country is rich in resources. The critical failure, the source argues, has been a failure of leadership, a failure of management, a poverty of governance, and this completely reframes the entire economic debate. It suggests that the real solutions aren't going to be found in just securing more loans or getting more aid, but in fundamentally reforming the systems of governance and leadership themselves.
So, where does all of this leave us? I mean, the idea of a poverty of governance is a pretty tough diagnosis. It's a hard truth to swallow. But the source doesn't just point out the problem. By showing us that original blueprint, it also maybe hints at a potential solution. And that brings us to our final big question. What could the path forward look like?
And really, this is the question we're left with at the end of this whole analysis. The book lays out a clear, powerful, and ambitious blueprint for economic sovereignty, one that's rooted in these principles of self-reliance, discipline, and integrity. Now, the journey may have strayed very, very far from that original map, but the map itself still exists. It's still there. So the ultimate question is a profound one. Can a nation, after decades of taking a different path, find its way back to its founding principles? Is it actually possible to reclaim that original vision?
Okay, let's try a little thought experiment. When I say Pakistan's economy, what's the very first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of people, the words that come to mind are probably things like struggling or debt, maybe foreign aid. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's just one very specific narrative and it's missing a much, much bigger picture? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful argument from our source material that completely flips that perception on its head. It asks this one fundamental question. Is Pakistan actually a poor country, or is it an incredibly rich country that has just been, well, really poorly managed?
And there it is, right off the bat. Our source material doesn't pull any punches. This quote is the core thesis, and it's pretty provocative, right? It completely reframes the problem. It suggests that the issue isn't a lack of anything. It's not about a lack of resources, not at all. It's about a system that's been built to prevent those resources from ever being used for the nation's own benefit. Now, you see those three words there, corruption, incompetence, and dependency. And while the first two are huge topics in their own right, it's that last one, dependency, that we're really going to focus on today. Because according to this argument, that word is the key that unlocks this whole cycle, keeping the country in what seems like a permanent state of economic trouble.
So that's the big question then, isn't it? How can a nation that supposedly has so much potential be made poor? Well, the source material we're looking at points to this very specific mechanism. It calls it the dependency spiral. And look, this isn't just about a country taking out a few loans when times are tough. No, this is about a systematic process, a loop, that creates a state of permanent reliance. It's a cycle that is incredibly difficult to break once you're in it. So let's take a closer look and break down exactly how this vicious cycle is said to work.
Now, there's a key phrase on this slide I really want you to focus on. Erode economic sovereignty. It sounds kind of academic, but what does it actually mean in the real world? Well, think of it this way. It means a country starts to slowly lose the power to make its own financial decisions. The conditions, the strings that are attached to all that aid and all those loans start to dictate domestic policy. They tell you what to tax, where you have to cut your spending, which industries get priority and which don't. It's basically like someone else is sitting on the couch holding the remote control to your entire country's economy. And the scary part is, the more you rely on them, the tighter their grip on that remote gets.
This right here, this illustrates the mechanics of that cycle perfectly. It's so simple, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It all starts at step one, right? A nation needs capital, maybe for infrastructure, maybe to balance the budget, so it takes on foreign loans. Simple enough. But those loans, they never come for free. They always come with strings attached, which brings us to step two. You have to accept the conditions. These conditions then lead directly, almost inevitably, to step three, a loss of sovereignty. Suddenly, external institutions like the IMF are in the room, influencing or even straight up dictating your economic policy. And often these policies don't really create genuine, self-sustaining growth. They're more like a band-aid, which of course drives the country right into a position where it needs, well, you guessed it, more loans. And boom, you're right back at the beginning. The spiral repeats, only it gets deeper and more restrictive with every single turn.
And this is the crucial point. This is where it all comes together. The source argues that this isn't just an economic issue. It's not just about spreadsheets and debt-to-GDP ratios. No, it's fundamentally a political one. Think about it. An economy that relies on outside actors just to keep the lights on, how can it possibly chart its own course in the world? Its foreign policy, its big strategic decisions, its national priorities, all of it becomes compromised. This quote really drives that idea home. Economic dependence and political independence are two sides of the same coin. You can't truly, genuinely have one without the other.
So there you have it. That's the trap, laid bare. It's a powerful and, to be honest, a pretty bleak diagnosis of the problem. A self-perpetuating cycle that seems impossible to escape. But okay, if this cycle of dependency is the poison, then what's the antidote? The good news is our source material doesn't just stop at identifying the problem. It doesn't just leave us there. It also presents a really powerful case for a solution that it claims lies right there, literally right beneath Pakistan's feet. Let's explore the other side of this paradox.
Okay, this is where the entire narrative takes a really dramatic turn. We're going to shift our focus completely. We're moving away from the external forces that are said to be holding the country back, and we're turning inward to the internal and, for the most part, completely untapped power that could propel it forward. The source material argues that Pakistan possesses what you could almost call a hidden superpower, a wealth of natural and human resources so incredibly vast that it makes this reliance on foreign loans seem, well, completely and utterly paradoxical.
Trillions. Just let that number sink in for a second. Trillions. With a T. We're not talking about billions here, which is already a huge number. We are talking about trillions of dollars worth of mineral resources just sitting there, under the ground. We're talking about massive deposits of copper, gold, coal, iron ore, even rare earth metals, the very building blocks of the entire modern global economy. According to our source, the country is sitting on a geological lottery ticket of almost unimaginable value. And the most astonishing part? This is just one piece of a much, much larger puzzle of potential wealth.
I mean, just look at this list. The sheer scale and the diversity of the assets here are absolutely staggering. It's not just about what's under the ground, it is about a massive, young workforce, a demographic dividend that countries with aging populations would do anything to have. It's about a geographically unmatched location, sitting right at the crossroads of South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. It's a natural-born hub for trade, for pipelines, for commerce. And then on top of all that, you have incredibly fertile agricultural land, immense renewable energy potential with all that sun, wind, and water. You've got a huge domestic market of over 230 million people and a global diaspora that sends back billions and billions in remittances every single year. Seriously, any one of these would be a massive asset for a country. Pakistan has all of.
So what we've done here is lay out two completely opposite realities that are somehow existing at the exact same time. On one side of the coin, you have this crippling, decades-long cycle of dependency. And on the other side, you have a literal treasure trove of national wealth and strategic assets just waiting to be used. And this, right here, brings us to the absolute core of the Pakistan paradox. The question isn't if the country has the resources to succeed. That's not even up for debate. The real question is why. Why do those resources remain untapped while that dependency spiral just keeps on turning?
And this slide just illustrates that stark choice perfectly. Just look at the two columns. On the left, you have the trap: foreign loans, endless debt, IMF conditions, policy manipulation, and ultimately, a loss of sovereignty. This is the path of dependency. Now look at the right, the potential: trillions in mineral wealth, a young and dynamic workforce, an unmatched geographic location, massive strategic and energy assets. This is the path of self-reliance. The central argument we're exploring today is that the items on the left are actively preventing the nation from capitalizing on the incredible items on the right. The debt trap is the cage, and the nation's superpower potential is what's locked inside.
And so this is where we'll end, this question right here. Because ultimately, this isn't just a question about economics, is it? It's a question of will. It's a question of strategy, of vision, and of sovereignty. The source material we've walked through today doesn't just present a critique of the past. It presents a profound challenge for the future. It argues that the path forward requires a clean break from the old model of dependency. It requires having the courage to build a new model, one based on the incredible assets the nation already possesses. So the ultimate question it leaves us with isn't about what Pakistan lacks, but rather, what will it finally take to unlock the immense wealth that has happened?
So can a nation just decide to become a superpower? I mean, really think about that for a second. It's a bold question, isn't it? But it's exactly what we're digging into today. This idea that a country's destiny isn't just about fate or geography or history, but about a deliberate, strategic choice. In this explainer, we're going to be walking through a pretty specific roadmap for exactly that kind of transformation. Our source is the blueprint laid out in the book Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan, written by Zaheer Ahmad Meer. It outlines a vision for what the author calls an economic resurrection. So, here's how we'll break it all down. First, we'll look at the economic crossroads Pakistan is facing. Then, we'll get into the bedrock of the whole plan, self-reliance. After that, we'll fire up the engine for growth, modernization. From there, we'll get a glimpse of the ultimate vision of a superpower. And finally, we'll land on the big decision that underpins this entire idea. Okay, let's start at that crossroads. The core argument in the book is that the nation is kind of stuck in a cycle of economic dependency. And to break free, it doesn't just need a few tweaks or reforms. It needs a complete resurrection, a total fundamental shift in how it thinks about its economy. So what does economic resurrection actually mean here? Well, it's not just about bumping up your GDP numbers. The book defines it as a conscious, nationwide strategy. It's got two main goals. First, to break free from the chains of dependency on foreign aid and loans, and second, to actively build an economy that's not just powerful, but, and this is the key word, self-reliant. And here it is, the full blueprint. The book lays out this really clear 7-step plan to make that resurrection happen. Just take a look at the list. It's pretty comprehensive, and you can see the logic. It kicks off with the foundational fixes, ending dependency and eliminating corruption. The book argues these are non-negotiables. Without them, the whole thing falls apart. Then it moves into the engines of wealth creation, transforming industry and modernizing agriculture. This is where you actually build the power. And finally, you get the fuel for that engine, fixing the energy sector, developing your people's skills, and massively boosting exports. We're going to walk through these, and you'll see how they're all designed to stack on top of each other. All right, let's get into that foundation and see how this thing is built. You know, you can't build a skyscraper on sand. For this economic blueprint, that solid ground is built on two massive pillars, getting rid of dependency and stamping out corruption. So, step 1, this is really the philosophical heart of the entire plan. And dependency. This is framed as the absolute first move you have to make. The idea is simple. A nation that has to rely on other countries to stay afloat can never, ever truly control its own destiny or hit its full potential. Now, what's really interesting here is how practical this is. It's not just some lofty goal. The book actually lists out the moves. You systematically cut down on foreign debt. You find ways to strengthen your own country's income. You sell more stuff to the world. And, at the same time, you build up your own industries so you don't have to buy so much from everyone else. It's a whole strategy for economic independence. And this quote just nails the spirit behind that first step. Self-reliance is national dignity and economic form. I mean, wow. That takes it from being just an economic policy and turns it into a core principle of national identity and pride. It's really about being able to stand on your own 2 feet. Now for that second foundational pillar, and it's just as important, eliminate corruption. The book argues that corruption isn't just a moral problem or a legal one. It's a massive economic hole. It's like trying to fill a bucket that's got a leak the size of a fist. No matter how much money you pour in, it just drains away before it can do any good. It's basically a hidden tax that stalls progress before it can even start. So how do you plug that giant hole? Well, the solutions laid out here are all about changing the system itself. We're talking about putting government services online to cut down on shady dealings, making all government purchasing totally transparent, having truly independent audits, holding people accountable no matter who they are, and protecting the people who have the courage to speak up. The whole point is to re-engineer the system so it's tough for corruption to even survive. Okay, so once you have that solid foundation of self-reliance and anti-corruption, it's time to build the engine of growth. This part is all about the proactive steps, the things you do to build, to modernize, and to really power the national economy forward. Let's kick things off with a sector that is just fundamental, agriculture. The book draws this stark contrast between the current state, which can be inefficient and bogged down by middlemen, and a truly modernized vision. This new vision is all about technology. We're talking mechanization, high-yield seeds, modern irrigation, everything designed to make farming more efficient, more profitable, and a serious powerhouse for exports. This next quote really sets the stage for the industrial piece of the puzzle. Industry, not aid, builds superpowers. The argument couldn't be clearer. Real economic strength comes from actually making things. So the blueprint calls for creating special technology zones and manufacturing hubs that are built from the ground up to produce high-value goods for the rest of the world. So, these last 3 steps in the plan, think of them as the high-octane fuel for the entire economic engine. They are the critical drivers. First, energy reform. The book makes the point that you can't be a superpower if your power grid is unreliable and expensive. It just cripples your industries. The plan is to tackle mismanagement and make a huge shift toward renewable energy and local fuels, basically energy security. The second driver, human capital. This is about a massive investment in people. You can have the best factories on Earth, but they're useless without a skilled workforce. This means totally reimagining education to create the engineers, technicians, and innovators needed for a modern economy. And the third driver is a relentless focus on exports. The goal is simple but powerful. Design the whole economy to sell more to the world than it buys. That's how you build national wealth. According to the book, mastering these 3 drivers is what will really get that engine roaring at full speed. Okay, so let's say this 7-step blueprint is actually followed. What's the endgame? What does success even look like? Well, this next section paints a really vivid picture of the future Pakistan that the book envisions. And the prediction here is incredibly bold. It's not some far-off dream. The book straight up claims that a Pakistan built on these principles of discipline, honesty, and self-reliance has the potential to become an economic superpower within a single generation. That's a powerful statement. And superpower isn't just a vague title. The vision breaks it down into real, tangible roles the country could play on the world stage. We're not talking about being good at just one thing, but being a leader across the board. A central hub for all regional trade, a vital corridor for energy, a go-to base for global manufacturing, an agricultural giant, a financial leader. And all of it, every single piece, powered by technology. That's the powerhouse this blueprint is aiming for. And that brings us to the final section, which really ties everything we've talked about together. After laying out the problem, the blueprint, and the vision, the book wraps up with a really direct and powerful message about what this all comes down to in the end. So here's the bottom line. The book's central message is that this entire transformation, this whole idea of an economic resurrection, it all hinges on one single thing: a decision. It argues that this isn't some fantasy or a far-off dream. It is a strategic, disciplined choice that has to be made. And, more importantly, a choice that has to be acted on with real national will. We'll leave you with this final quote from the book, because it just perfectly sums up the entire philosophy of this blueprint. A dependent Pakistan can never rise. A self-reliant Pakistan can never fall. It's a statement of 2 completely different paths, a stark contrast. And it leaves us all with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Which path do you choose?